All right, so here we're using the find all operator function, right? That is being provided to us by the default implementation CRUD operator, right? The CRUD, our generic CRUD class, right? That we're extending. So oftentimes we want to implement our own implementation of what we mean by find all. One of the problems here is that the name is too generic, right? It doesn't seem that it's specific to us. Right? Ideally, it would have the same name as maybe find all modules. Maybe that's something more meaningful to us. Yes. Well, we can override that. We can go into our repository and implement our own queries, right? And how we want to implement them. Okay, meaning we might not like the SQL that they're using for retrieving it. Although I don't see anything wrong with the SQL. I believe it was perfectly fine. I don't know if it's we could see it here and run. Notice that here's our select statement, right? That it's generating for it's using to retrieve things from the module table. See that, right? There might be nothing wrong with the SQL, right? But we can override it and say, well, no, I want you to use some other SQL. Yes. So also, I don't like the name you're giving it. Find all is too generic for me, right? So let's implement an implementation here of retrieving things from the database. So we can call it public. Also, I don't like the fact that you are using iterators. So we want, instead of an API that gives us the kind of level of abstraction we want, I want to treat it as a list, and the function I want it to be called find all modules. Right? And that's the function that I want. That's the API that I want. Okay. Notice that we are implementing this inside of an interface. So we don't actually implement the algorithm. Instead, we're going to tell our CRUD operator, on how to use JPA to go and fetch this data for me, right? We're going to override the query that JPA is using, right? Maybe you don't like it, right? So we can override it by using a query annotation, which says, for this function to implement that function, this is the query I want you to use, right? And the easiest thing to do is that we can configure right here and give it a string, and that string will be the SQL that we want to use, right? Now, there's two syntax that you can use here. You can use two syntax. You can use the little SQL that you want to use, right? The little syntax you want to use, or you can use a higher level syntax, right? Which is called, so you can use SQL, which is the low level little SQL that's going to be used, or you can use a higher level called JPQL, right? Java Persistence Query Language, right? And we'll see the difference. So let's use first the one we are already familiar with, right? We would say value, and we give the SQL might be something like select star from modules. That's it, right? That would be the SQL query, right? And then the next thing would be the native query. Oops. Native query, we can say that it's true. We're saying this query is native, meaning this is little SQL. I want you to use this exact string, right, to go out to the server, right? So you need to turn it on by saying native query, because that is not what the default JPA wants to do. JPA doesn't want you to use the native query, right? Because if you use this query, now you are tied to your vendor, right? If tomorrow you go out and purchase and you migrate your Java code, and underneath you change your database vendor, and now you're using Oracle instead of MySQL or SQL Server, now your string is now tied to that particular vendor. You see that? Instead, what JPA suggests is that you use a higher level language, which it can convert into the different dialects of the different vendors. Yes, but first let's use this low level SQL. Let's see how that works, right? We can go back to the controller And instead of using the repository, the generic find all, we can now use repository dot find all modules. Notice that I don't have to cast, right? Because what it's returning is exactly what I want, and I'm just returning it, right? Yes. Right. So if we rerun this, hopefully this will work just the same. Right, so this should work exactly like as before. Right? No difference. Everybody good?